Good morning, Jags. This is Fahad. Today is Thursday, September 17th. Let's get started. If you go to the history of Jaguar media, one of the conversations that we had, this was on September 8th. It's right on the Jag Media website. This is where I discussed, I did not bring any kind of a specific stock ideas that morning, and I didn't want to go into any kind of setups or discussions on what to expect or single stock stories essentially, which I normally try to do each morning in conversations. I dedicated that entire morning conversations video on September 8th about what I was seeing in Nasdaq, and here's a summary of that. Basically maintained a high level view on the market that Nasdaq has fallen 10% in less than 2 sessions on highest volume since March. And I told everybody that avoid the pitfalls, the mistakes and pitfalls that of making quick assumptions that the recovery is due to recency bias, and keep in mind that the froth from the retail institutional participations of call options, stretch valuations, extreme sentiment, and weak seasonality, and more importantly, perhaps the election risk, is all going to be contributing to this. And we do not know how long can this correction in Nasdaq last. It could last 6 to 8 weeks, all the way up until election, maybe a little bit after the election is over, because we do not know if the results of the election will be known immediately. It could be a very contested race for different reasons. And so all these things were discussed. I would like to refresh back that particular comment and discussion and basically keep my thoughts today same way at a very high level. In that morning conversation on September 8th, I mentioned that there's going to be a little bit of a bounce back after we came down to this 11,000 level, which is a support. But potential bear flag formation and a breakdown from this would open the door all the way to 10,500 in Nasdaq, which would be another 5% sell-off, completing a total wave of about 15% sell-off from the highs in Nasdaq. And an absolute worst case scenario, if we start to take out 10,500 in Nasdaq, then there is another major air pocket that could carry this thing much lower, potentially to under 10,000 level, which would be about 20 to 25% sell off from 52-week high. And that's how froth comes out of the market. Remember that the froth that we saw with Tesla rising 80% in 2 weeks, in 12 days really, and Apple adding $800 billion in market cap, and all the stuff that we discussed yesterday in the chat room. What I noticed, and I discussed this, is that the tone from the Jerome Powell conference that took place after FOMC was, in my opinion, was overconfident tone. Combining that with the fraud that we have in Nasdaq is a dangerous combination. And so I had this hunch that thing was going to get a little bit shaky after Federal Reserve just came out, basically saying everything is perfectly fine with its very overconfident tone. And as a result, we saw, if you look at chart after chart, Amazon right into the close yesterday in the final half hour of trading. It gave up that $3,100 support that I had been talking about. If you go to the chart, you'll see right here, this is that 3,100 support. And how ugly will it get from here? Well, it's already down another $60, $70 or 2% below that. It'll probably tag about 29.50 in my view, which is the level where we saw lots of congestion last time. If you go to Shopify, another momentum, this one broke down through $900 support also in the final 15 minutes of trading. You can see right here, all in the last half hour to 15 minutes of trading, it gave up the $900 support, and this thing is going to gap down by about $20. So Shopify potentially has major risk over here, purely technically speaking, all the way to 770 level. And if you go to Apple, Apple is sitting right at 110, and in pre-market, it is attacking that support. In fact, it briefly dipped below $110 support. And so going back to the daily chart, you can see that this is where that level is. And below that, there is air pocket. That air pocket is open, as well as the gap that remains to be filled all the way to $98 per share. So that's $12 or more than 10% to a downside in Apple. Go to Google. Google closed right at 1520 support yesterday. This is also a bear flag. This too has an air pocket with major VOP support coming in around 1430. So that's another $80 below where Google closed yesterday if the breakdown continues. And then you go to Microsoft, which has been a stealth performer, no question about it. One of the greatest, strongest stocks in this market. But even this one is going to be attacking the $200 support today. And look closely below that, there is large air pocket underneath this stock as well. That opens the door for Microsoft all the way down to 186. These are big moves from 200 to 186. There's a lot of air pockets here. You can just go down the list this way. And then Tesla, let's talk about this too real quick, because the battery day is coming up and there's a lot of optimism that the company will announce something really exciting in this battery day. What if that day actually ends up becoming a sell the news event? From my perspective, when I look at Tesla, this thing basically made a lower high, right? It came down hard after the froth came out after the post split. I had put options into this one, as you all know, when the stock was falling apart, and then a major bounce back. But is this making a lower high? And if it is, then you want to watch out. Now, naturally, if it takes out this week's high, which was $461 per share, if it takes out this week's high, then the tone will change, and then I think this may potentially make a run all the way to 500 and retest that level, and then we'll see a double top there or something. But could be excuse me, could be making a lower high. Point here is that in the tech sector, one after another, you're seeing potential breakdowns with the overconfident Fed. You want to be a little bit careful here, because right now when I'm looking at it, Nasdaq futures are down about 240 points. But what is to say we're going to have a 500-point day, down day in Nasdaq today? Could be a really ugly day. Could be the beginning of the similar kind of leg down as we saw over here. Basically a second wave of froth coming out from speculative mania that we have seen in the stock market, particularly in 2 months leading up to this start of correction that began with the month of September. All right. I also would like to mention just an indication. There are no trade ideas here or anything, but a way to how to basically trade some of these things for those that are sharpshooters. So take a look at Shopify, for example. Yesterday, just to give you an idea, and this is not for everyone's cup of tea, but yesterday, as this thing was settling right at $900 support this entire afternoon, morning and afternoon, and I had this line drawn at 900 to see if this will break down. If you go to Shopify option chain and you look at this front week September expiry 850 strike puts right here. Let's chart this out. If you chart this out, you will see what these puts were doing. The whole time yesterday afternoon, let me get rid of the purple line. You don't need to see the theoretical price action. But these puts were trading for about $2.50. And then in the last 15 minutes to half hour, the market, they ripped higher from $2.50 and closed at $6.90. Basically had a huge run in these put options in the matter of 15 minutes to half hour as the stock started to break down. And this is how, for very active traders that have, you need sometimes balls of steel basically to trade short-term call options and put options like this. But for those that are able to, with sharp eyes, able to identify specific breakdowns and breakouts level, and then capture those moments in a moment as soon as they started to happen, using short-term weekly calls and puts. And remember, we did a lot of this on the call side in the last month and a half too. There is money to be made. Naturally, you don't bet a house on this, but on something like this. Now, this stock is going to gap down again by another $20, $25 in pre-market, which means these, even though they don't have a lot of time remaining, but these September 850 puts are probably going to jump to $10 plus. And they were going for $2 in the afternoon yesterday, just before we started to see this thing slip below $900 support. And you can just run similar kind of maths, in all of these big cap tech names. So with all of this said, the last thing I will say is, what I want to see in the market today is that when the Nasdaq is going to gap down by about 230 to 240 points, I want to see that in the early part of the trading, whether we're going to see some bounces back. And I think you may. You may see Nasdaq actually cut half of its losses. You may see an attempted rally right after market close opens in the first half hour to maybe 1 hour of trading, and may try to recover half of those positions. And if that happens, I'm going to be watching some of these technical patterns around 10:30, 10 o'clock or 10:30 this morning to see if Amazon makes a lower high, intraday lower high, or basically similarly Shopify and all of these other names make a lower high. And if that's what happens and we start to see a bit of a fading price action, is when I will step into these some short-term put options in big cap tech names to try to play them to the downside for eventual more selling to come sometimes in the afternoon or late in the afternoon, and maybe even continuing tomorrow. So these are the big high level thoughts. Nothing is specific, stock is specific, but just watch how Nasdaq is doing. That's it from me. Jay.
Morning, everyone. So on Tuesday, in conversations, Avo brought up two building product names in Masonite and Geldwen. And this led me to actually looking at another company in the space called PGT Innovations. Ticker is PGTI. They manufacture hurricane impact resistant residential windows and doors. And I'm going to have a homepage article later today on the name. But so a quick overview, company reported their Q2 earnings back on August 12th. A couple highlights were that a recent acquisition that they made in 2020, New South Window Solutions. That business unit had a strong quarter. It grew orders more than 80%. Meanwhile, overall for the company in the back half of Q2, this is when they started to see a recovery. They noted that in their Southeast business unit in the month of June, it recorded a 19% growth in dollar value of orders. JP Morgan was out with a post-earnings note saying that order growth in July was noted as being very similar to June. So like I said, I'll have a homepage article later today on this company.
Interesting update. I love this chart. Beautiful setup over here for a technical breakout, and a nice strong close yesterday with a bit of a power candle. Volume also picked up compared to the last 2 weeks. MACD is starting to give a little bit of a bull cross pretty soon as it's curling higher. And if you draw the lines in the RSI, you will see that that momentum indicator is starting to show a bull cross here as well. So everything, all stars are lining up in favor for a breakout in this company. So I like it purely in that direction. And then next, naturally, housing continues to be a bright spot in this market. And we have talked about a lot of those different kind of ideas recently, Masonite and a whole bunch of other names. So this plays into that theme as well. Interesting stuff. Looking forward to your article on homepage. Chronicle.
Morning. Very quick update on Banco de Chile, symbol BCH. On top of coronavirus cases remaining elevated and the government having to impose permits and restrictions over the upcoming national holidays, the country is slowly coming up to fresh elections next year. And there's also going to be discussions over the constitution. Mass protests over the pensions crisis and inequality are still taking place, as we covered on Jaguar Media. These protests have been going on for almost a year now. The authorities haven't been able to put an end to them, and I think just last weekend there was about 100 arrests. There is growing support for reform and more left-wing policies, and I mentioned this because the social safety net crisis is really taking a toll on Chile consumer confidence. Going back to the video we recorded, we have to remember that consumers represent nearly 2/3 of Banco de Chile's loan book. Meanwhile, the Chilean central bank continues to hold its interest rate at a record low of 0.5%. The latest monetary policy meeting minutes released yesterday mentions that consumer loans in Chile have continued to decline so far in the current quarter. And meanwhile, looking at the Q2 earnings report of the company itself, the figures showed a huge deceleration, no surprises there, but I think it's really telling that even management themselves said in the conference call, quote unquote, "We are pessimistic about the future relative to other countries in the region. So nothing substantial, just a quick update, and we continue to like the short.
Yeah, thanks for the update. I'm actually short this name myself, and so have been short ever since we produced this video on May 17th in Jaguar Media. And it was a great production by Chronicle here. And since then, this stock actually hasn't really done much. It has been in a steady downward spiral, despite the market basically going at the highs. This one, and then also I will just add to this BAP, which I know is a little bit different, but Credit Corp, which is a similar kind of a situation, financial basically, and continues to remain in doldrum basically. And I'm looking for more breakdowns in some of these names. So thanks for that update. Let's see if it makes it to its new 52-week low pretty soon. By the way, guys, it seems to me that oops, not this, sorry. Wrong picture right here. I guess Donald Trump is taking an issue with how Twitter creates trending things on, basically Twitter makes sure that trending on Twitter is anything bad, fake, or not about President Donald Trump. So obvious what they're doing being studied now. So I guess the President of the United States is now studying how Twitter tags something as trending on Twitter. So I don't know what this means for anything, because when he says we're studying for this now, so is there another indictment or something coming from Department of Justice, DOJ, or some kind of inquiry into how Twitter creates trending? Nevertheless, I just wanted to bring it up because these kind of news possibly means nothing. It's just noise. But given the tech wreck that is taking place this morning, see if Twitter also starts to break down through $38 support if this happens. And if the Twitter also loses this, then this will get ugly, because I could see this thing moving back into the mid 30s and possibly even to low 30s. Everything seems to move in a herd mentality these days in tech sector, and social media companies are always under fire going into this election year right now. Okay, that was all I was going to say on Twitter. Avo.
Morning, everyone. Looking at Ritchie Brothers, RBA is the ticker. Jay had mentioned this in conversations on August 12th, and he had pointed out to a March 70-80 call spread. Now, a couple of days ago, there was another new call spread, or a call spread opened in this one, March 65-75. So I don't know if it's the same trader, but 1,000 contracts going out to March. And there isn't any new research that I can point to, but I can remind you that back in early August, Bank of America had a note on it with a lot of good positive things in there regarding their online auctions increasingly being more popular. And this definitely will save company money if they can continue, more online versus holding auctions at the locations. Because they can sell property that they have because they've done auctions in a lot of small properties. So if they can sell up to 3,000 acres, is what the Bank of America analyst thinks, that would add a lot of liquidity to the company, and in fact, they could be net debt free in the next 18 months or so. That's about it. I don't have anything else to add, but that caught my attention because this company does not do a lot of options, especially on the Canadian side. And I think you let this come down a little bit more, maybe test the 50-day or so around $50, $52 or so. And for a long run, I still like this company, which I had bought some years ago and finally sold.
I was going to say that you have owned this stock forever, haven't you?
I did, not anymore though.
Oh,
it was
okay.
a really good run.
Okay, so that quarter that came out a month or so ago, we all looked at it. It was a fabulous quarter. Lots of positive surprises into that one, and a monster breakout to my surprise, the significance of this. And since that came out, This is where you are discussing the action. If you go out to the March and take a look at all these option activity, the 65, 70, 75, and 80. A lot of these have been done as spreads, called spreads. Nonetheless, there's a lot of bullish positioning into these strikes out in March. So traders continuing to bet more upside, but the stock was quite overbought. RSI had gone to above 90 briefly, so naturally some correction was necessary. Now RSI is back to 50. MACD is potentially showing early signs of stabilizing. I'll be watching this closely right here around 55. I think it needs a bit more time, some stabilization over here, and then let's see that we have a better reference level with a basing formation, and then we can go long at that point for the next leg higher in the name. But a really impressive quarter at the time when they reported. Okay, good stuff. Let's stop over here, and we'll see you in the chat room shortly.